Glad to have you with us.
Thank you. Glad to be with you.
Good.
Thank you.
Now, Israel is being pressured to some degree to release some of its prisoners in return for the hostages being released by the Arabs. What is the thinking in Israel on this at the moment? What's your thinking on it?
Well, we have some prisoners that were caught trying to infiltrate Israel, and we're prepared to exchange them for our prisoners, our soldiers held in captivity, or we think held in captivity in Lebanon. It's important that we be precise about definition. Hostages are people that are innocent people that are yanked off the street somewhere and held for ransom, for some kind of ransom. Soldiers who fall prisoner are prisoners of war. So we're prepared to exchange our POWs, or rather to get our POWs back home in exchange for Lebanese prisoners caught infiltrating Israel. We're not holding hostages, and that's not in the cards. We're not trading our hostages because we don't have any.
Yeah, Mr. Netanyahu, we do hear the phrase that this exchange should be of hostages on both sides. Now, to be clear about what you're saying, I gather you're saying that Israel would be willing, as in the past, to release some people you're holding in exchange for Israeli citizens and soldiers, but if that coincided with the release of these other hostages that are being held by various groups in Lebanon, that would be a coincidence as far as you're concerned.
Well, it wouldn't be a coincidence, but our objective in having such an exchange is not to trade hostages because we don't have any. And in fact, that statement really gets my goat, because we're not in the business of taking hostages. The one question that you might ask me is Sheikh Ubaid an innocent hostage? He's obviously not. He's a godfather of the mafia that takes hostages. So we did, yes, seize him as a leverage, but he's the only example of this. And the important thing is this: we're prepared to have an exchange, to have our boys brought back home, our POWs, our MIAs. We would like to see the scene that I've just heard, I haven't seen, but heard on the earpiece, with Edward Tracy's mother so happy and so glad. We have families who are now in anguish and waiting for such a result as well. But if in the course of such an exchange, this facilitates the release of the Western hostages who were taken by the Hezbollah group, that's fine with us, more than fine.
What kind of persons detained by you now are you not willing to release to see this brought about?
Well, we have people caught on flagranti, if you will, in terrorist acts in Israel, blowing up bus stations, killing people and so on. That's not in the cards. But there is a very sizable Lebanese contingent, if you will, of people caught infiltrating the Israeli border. And from our point of view, that's part of the possibility of an exchange.
You brought up Sheikh Ubaid, and as the old saying goes, you took the words right out of my mouth, Mr. Minister. Continue your discussion of why you seized him and kidnapped him.
Well, if you mean we kidnapped the kidnapper, yes, we did do that. But what you have in the case of Hezbollah is basically a terrorist organization that works on the principle of abducting people. It is run by people like Ubaid, and it has spiritual leaders like Sheikh Fadlallah. So the first thing we wanted to do is, of course, exert pressure on the, if you will, on the mafioso, on the mafiosi, by taking a leading mafioso, leading crime.
If I'm correct, after you seized him, other people were taken hostage. What did you gain by seizing him?
And I'm talking about Israeli prisoners. No, that's not the case. We've had, in fact, a running exchange of sorts with the Hezbollah. From the moment that we seized Sheikh Ubaid, we could see the flow of communication beginning. However incomplete and unsatisfactory, it began as a result of that pressure. I would say that that, in fact, could be a contributing factor in the case of the release of the Western hostages. I hope it will be.
All right, you say that no more Israelis were kidnapped, but other Westerners were kidnapped after you took Sheikh Ubaid. Let me ask you whether you are going to make any gesture toward a unilateral release at this point, as Britain has called on you to do.
Well, we did that 9 months ago. Most people don't know that. We released 40 Shiites, these Lebanese prisoners, held in South Lebanon. Nothing happened. Absolutely nothing happened. If we were, say, to release Sheikh Ubaid, I suspect that it would kill any possibility of a deal that includes, of course, the Western hostages. I want to add one other point that I think is overlooked. People are either tiptoeing around it, or they're simply not addressing the main point. The main point is not, well, the main point is who really controls the hostage takers, who control the hostages. We know that Hezbollah operates on Syrian-controlled territory. We know they receive instructions and money and orders from Iran. How do we know that? Well, we know it because when you had, for example, the arms for hostages deal in the Iran-Contra affair, The deal was that Iran would get something and would produce hostages. In the last 48 hours, we had another demonstration of that.
Well, I take it...
Syria... Yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Minister. I take it that the answer to my question then was that you are not now going to release unilaterally anybody.
We will not make any arrangement, Sam, that does not include the full accounting and the release of our boys in Lebanon. But we're prepared to enter that arrangement right away as well.
Are those negotiations underway at the moment?
We have not had any approach. I repeat again the point that I was making when you asked me the question. If you want to effect the full release of hostages, if you want to prevent future Terry Andersons, suppose we have an exchange. Suppose the people come home. Everyone comes home. What's to prevent another Francis Scipio from being yanked off the streets in Beirut tomorrow?
Well, I take it, Minister, that's one of the reasons why some people want to get a peace conference going, so that the region will eventually live in peace.
That would be a very nice thing to say, but if you want to live really on the ground and see how things are done here, it's done when Syria and Iran decide that hostage-taking does not pay. Now, they control the hostage-taking. Syria apparently did not like a hostage-taking that was done by groups that weren't authorized to do it. So within 48 hours, they had a French hostage just now released. They have the capacity to release everyone. Unless the United States, unless the West tells Syria and Iran, look, we know you're behind the hostage-takers. We know it's within your power to have them all released. Have them all released. Cough them up. The jig is up. If you don't say that very clearly, and if you don't impress it upon these governments who now need you and depend on you and depend on Western aid, if you don't take that policy, then we might effect an exchange, but you'll have more hostages. The supply is limitless.
George, we have a few seconds left.
Mr. Netanyahu, any exchange involving Israel is apt to involve wildly asymmetrical numbers, Israel releasing a great many more people than it gets in return. Is that not inherently an incentive for the taking of more hostages?
Not hostages, because what we have are, as you know, POWs.
I'm talking about an incentive for your adversaries to take hostages as a lever for these asymmetrical releases.
Yeah, well, if the equation that is posited is that somehow Western hostages are yanked off the street of Beirut, and Israel is then pressured by the West to release people that it caught legitimately trying to infiltrate its borders, then that would be an incentive, A, to take hostages, but and also to infiltrate Israel's borders.
Isn't that precisely what's going on?
Well, to a limited extent, obviously, every exchange, even prisoners for POWs, does create that kind of incentive when it's offside in numbers. But we want our boys back home. We have families that are just crying and in anguish, and we want to see them back. We're prepared to trade prisoners, and I hope that such a trade takes place.
Minister Netanyahu, thank you. Thanks very much for coming in, giving us your views today.